And it was around this depot behind me, the Western and Atlantic Depot at Tunnel Hill, that the luck of Andrew's raiders truly began to run dry. They had pulled up the General and were trying to light the wood piles in front of this depot on fire, but they were still being pursued by Conductor Fuller, who had dropped off a man named Henderson just a short ways south of town to relay a message by telegram up to Chattanooga, letting them know that these raiders were heading their way. And so now the raiders find themselves stuck between a rock and a hard place. Even though they had clipped the telegraph lines, the message got through, and they weren't even able to burn the wood on the depot because it had just rained. And so they and the train push forward north through the tunnel, and it's an uphill battle both literally and figuratively. They're running out of fuel, and they are forced to literally run through the tunnel here. And the chase would end only 2 miles south of their intended destination. Now, the South was not an industrial place at all, so you can see, even as far back as early on in the Civil War with Andrew's raiders, a primary tactic was destroying the railroads wherever they could. They tried burning the bridge here, but they couldn't do it because around this time it started to rain. But this is kind of a recreation of what Sherman did, and these were called Sherman's neckties. They would heat up the metal and wrap it around wood. But this is the type of pile that Andrew's raiders were looking for to burn, but like right now, it had rained very recently and they weren't able to do it. And to make matters worse, Fuller had sent out a telegram up to Chattanooga, and they were stuck between a rock and a hard place. Now, this is the Historic Society that does tours, but the depot is right up there. And actually, another interesting fact, there was a chicken coop in there for a little while before they had come by and turned it into a historic site. And this tunnel is a feat of engineering marvel for the time in which it was built, beginning in 1848. By the 1860s, this was crucial in Confederate war efforts as it linked Chattanooga with Atlanta, which at the time was called Terminus. And during the Great Locomotive Chase, this is where Andrew and his raiders actually darted through. A fascinating glimpse back into, you can imagine these men running through this tunnel trying to escape, but they know that they're surrounded on both sides. To the north from Confederate authorities coming from Chattanooga, even in a Union-friendly area, and to the south from the Texas, which is literally barreling down on them backwards. And they have run out of fuel, and they're now running out of water. And it was around the town of Ringgold that they finally bailed, and every last one of them was caught. And because this tunnel passed through solid limestone, the spare stone was actually not wasted. It was used for the depot just down the road. And you can imagine, back when trains were a fairly new invention, this would have been something that the town was incredibly proud of. In fact, they named themselves Tunnel Hill. And it's just now setting in how terrifying this must have been for Andrew's raiders, because the lights haven't turned on for a good 30 seconds, and I'm already 2/3 of the way through the tunnel looking at the end. But running through this tunnel, tripping and stumbling over all the different railroad ties, must have been a terrifying experience. While I'm in Tunnel Hill, Georgia, talking about the history of Andrew's raiders and the Battle of Resaca, I wanted to show you the grave of John Bell Hood's leg. This is the museum, and as I pan over here, the tunnel is to my right, and just to the left outside of it, understand that John Bell Hood was a Confederate general who was injured during the opening stages of the Atlanta campaign at the Battle of Chickamauga, and his leg was gangrenous, so they amputated it, and they were sure that he was going to die, but they kept his leg alongside him, rotting in the hospital, thinking that they wanted to bury him as a whole general. Well, when they were pretty confident that he was healthy enough to not die, they buried his leg out here in front of the hospital. And the hospital was at the Clisby Austin House near the well in town, because Sherman had kind of commandeered many homes in Tunnel Hill to use as makeshift hospitals around the Battle of Chickamauga and Resaca in the opening of the Atlanta campaign. And the train depot up in Ringgold is actually the only train depot that's been in continuous use since it was first created in 1850. And Andrews Raiders came through here. It was their last stop before they had to bail, and the train totally ran out of water and fuel just about a mile north of here. And we're lucky to actually see a train pass by today. Take a look. And so throughout the war, this depot served at varying points as a Confederate hospital, as a headquarters for the Confederates after the Battle of Chickamauga, when they basically had to retreat, and they held this gap for enough time to allow the retreating Confederate armies to make it up and over the top. And after that, it was also used, I believe, for a period of time by the Union, because of course Sherman made his way down here as a kind of lead up to the battles at Resaca in the Atlanta campaign. Now, I'm not too well versed in Confederate history or Civil War history because I just moved back to Georgia, and right now I'm kind of learning one subject at a time. I'm learning Andrews Raiders first. I just learned Resaca earlier today. I was out at the reenactment, so I'm going to take this one bite at a time and keep this video more focused on Andrews Raiders, because just about, I believe it's 2 miles north, the general came to a stop, and most of the men, all of the men, were captured within several days. But as you look around, you can see that as a hospital and Confederate headquarters for a short period of time, this was actually a landmark for the battles that took place around here, and graffiti was made by either Confederate soldiers, or you actually have the very early 1900s, but you've got plenty of graffiti left on the sandstone here, unlike the one at Tunnel Hill, because the depot there was made of limestone, a little bit harder to carve your name into. Interestingly enough, this isn't the first time I have seen this symbol carved into the building here. It looks like an upside-down horseshoe for good luck, but I'm not sure what to make of this. And of all the graffiti at the Ringgold Gap Depot, this is one that sticks out most in my mind. A tiny little cross, and in all likelihood you've got some poor kid that has never been to the South in his life marching through here, and battle is fresh in his mind, and he carves this. And I hope he made it. And it was at precisely this point on the tracks, 2 miles north of the Ringgold Depot, that Andrews Raiders truly ran out of luck. They ran out of fuel, water was exhausted, and they were forced to pull over and run into the woods. And over the next few days, all of them would be captured, many executed, 6 of them exchanged, and 8 of them would escape the Fulton County Jail. The ones who were exchanged actually were awarded the Medal of Honor first, and the executed and survivors were awarded later